I'd been living as a boy for 3 years, and I'd gotten good at it. So good that even my own father, the brutal alpha of Ironclaw Pack, had forgotten he had a daughter. I bound my chest every morning until I couldn't breathe properly, cut my hair short with a dull knife, kept my voice low and my eyes down, and survived by being invisible among the males who would have destroyed me if they'd known the truth. Ironclaw didn't tolerate weakness, and in my father's pack, being female meant being weak, meant being used, broken, and discarded like every other Omega woman who'd made the mistake of existing where Alpha Gregor Horn could see them. So I became Leo. Just Leo. A scrawny young male who worked in the kitchens, kept his head down, and prayed daily that no one would look too closely at the boy who didn't quite fit. For 3 years, it worked. For 3 years, I was safe, or as safe as anyone could be in Ironclaw, where violence was currency and mercy was weakness. Then Alpha King Chris Bramblett came to inspect our pack, and everything I'd built to protect myself shattered the moment he stepped through our gates. I was in the kitchen when I felt it, pressure in the air that made every wolf in Ironclaw instinctively submit, power so overwhelming it felt like the atmosphere itself was bowing. The Alpha King had arrived, and I needed to stay far away from him, needed to remain invisible like I always did. But then I heard the whispers from the wolves who'd witnessed his arrival. He's searching for something. Says he smells his mate nearby. The Alpha King's fated mate is somewhere in Ironclaw. And my blood ran cold, because I knew, somehow, impossibly, I knew, that the most powerful wolf in 5 kingdoms was hunting for me. The boy who wasn't a boy. The hidden daughter of an alpha who'd sooner kill me than let me be claimed by anyone. The woman who'd spent 3 years erasing her own existence to survive. He was hunting me by scent, and I had nowhere left to hide. She disguised herself as a boy to survive, but the Alpha King's wolf doesn't care about disguises when it's found its mate. What happens when the most powerful alpha alive starts hunting through the pack for the boy, whose scent is driving him insane? Drop your predictions and smash subscribe because this identity reveal is going to be violent, and her father is not going to let her go without a fight. I woke before dawn like I always did, in the tiny room I shared with 3 other kitchen workers, all male, all completely unaware that Leo, who slept in the corner bunk, wasn't what he seemed. The binding cloth came first. Every morning for 3 years, I'd wrap my chest so tightly I could barely breathe, flattening any curve that might give away my actual gender. It hurt. Moon goddess, it hurt. Ribs aching, lungs compressed, every breath a reminder that survival required pain. But pain was better than death. Pain was better than what happened to Omega females in the Ironclaw pack. I dressed in the rough clothing I'd scavenged, an oversized shirt that disguised my shape, pants I'd altered to fit, boots that were too big but made my feet look larger and more masculine. My hair I kept brutally short, cutting it myself whenever it grew long enough to look feminine. The voice was harder. I'd spent months training myself to speak lower, to pitch my words in my chest rather than my throat. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes when I was startled or scared, my natural voice slipped through. But most wolves didn't notice. Or if they did, they assumed I was just a young male whose voice hadn't fully dropped yet. Leo, you awake? One of my roommates, a beta named Thomas, rolled over in his bunk. Kitchen duty starts in 20 minutes. Don't be late again, or Gregor will have your hide.
Gregor.
My father. The alpha who'd had my mother killed for disappointing him by bearing a daughter instead of a son. He didn't know I existed. Didn't remember the worthless female child who'd been born 13 years ago and supposedly died shortly after. Aunt Ruth had told everyone I'd died of illness, and Gregor hadn't cared enough to verify. Why would he? I was just another failed Omega, another disappointment, easily forgotten. I'm up, I said, keeping my voice carefully low. Heading to the kitchens now. The pack was already stirring. Warriors heading to training grounds, betas organizing patrols, omegas, the few who'd survived Ironclaw's brutal culture, hurrying to their assigned duties. I kept my head down, my movements masculine, my entire presence designed to be forgettable. Just Leo. Just another low-ranking wolf who worked in the kitchens and wasn't worth noticing. I'd made it 3 years like this. 3 years of careful hiding, constant fear, exhausting performance. But I was alive. My mother was dead, killed for her failure. I was alive because I'd learned to not be female. The kitchens were already chaotic. Head cook barking orders, wolves scrambling to prepare breakfast for over 200 pack members. I slipped into my usual position, chopping vegetables with mechanical precision while keeping my awareness on everything around me. That's when I heard it. Whispers spread through the kitchen like wildfire. The Alpha King is coming. Inspection today. Gregor's been preparing for weeks. Better not mess anything up. The king has authority to dismantle packs that displease him. My knife slipped, nearly cutting my finger. The Alpha King.
Chris Bramblett.
The most powerful wolf in 5 kingdoms, known for his ruthless efficiency and absolute authority over every pack in his territories. He was coming here.
Today.
Terror clawed at my throat. I'd heard stories about the Alpha King, how he could sense weakness, how he saw through deception, how nothing escaped his notice during inspections. What if he looked at me and somehow knew? What if my disguise wasn't good enough to fool the most powerful alpha alive? Leo, stop panicking and focus on the vegetables, the head cook snapped. If you're this nervous during the actual inspection, Gregor will have you whipped for embarrassing the pack. Sorry, I mumbled, returning to chopping with shaking hands. The morning passed in a blur of preparation, food being prepared to perfection, kitchens being cleaned until they gleamed, every wolf being reminded that any failure during the Alpha King's inspection would be punished severely. I planned to stay hidden in the back of the kitchens, away from anywhere the Alpha King might visit. Just keep working, keep invisible, wait for the inspection to end and life to return to its normal terrible routine. Then I felt it. Pressure in the air, sudden, overwhelming, making every wolf in Iron Claw instinctively submit. Alpha dominance, so powerful it felt like gravity itself had increased, pressing down on all of us with weight that couldn't be resisted. The Alpha King had arrived. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see wolves dropping to their knees in the courtyard, submission to power that couldn't be challenged. Even my father, the brutal Alpha Gregor, was bowing his head in recognition of superior authority. And then I smelled him. Pine and winter storms, and something wild that made my wolf surge to consciousness for the first time in years. She'd been dormant, suppressed by fear and wolfsbane I occasionally took to further hide my scent. But now she was awake, pressing against my consciousness with desperate recognition.
Mate.
That's our mate. The Alpha King is our mate.
No.
No, that was impossible. That couldn't be happening. The mate bond was supposed to be rare, sacred, reserved for wolves who were free to claim each other. Not for hidden daughters disguised as boys, not for wolves who couldn't afford to be noticed by anyone, especially not the most powerful alpha in the kingdoms. Everyone to the courtyard. Gregor's voice carried through the pack, Alpha command making it impossible to refuse. The Alpha King will inspect all pack members.
No exceptions.
I tried to stay in the kitchens, tried to find somewhere to hide. But the command pulled at me like physical chains, and my traitorous wolf, excited by her mate's presence, was making it impossible to resist. I walked into the courtyard with the rest of the kitchen staff, keeping my head down, my posture masculine, my breathing as steady as I could manage despite the panic. Just be invisible. Just be one more unremarkable wolf in a crowd of 200. He won't notice you. He can't notice you. Alpha King Chris Bramblett stood at the center of the courtyard, and my first glimpse of him nearly broke my careful composure. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, built like a warrior, with silver hair that marked him as descended from ancient bloodlines and amber eyes that seemed to see everything. Power radiated from him like heat from fire, making even Gregor's brutal dominance seem weak by comparison. And he was searching for something. His head turned slowly, scanning the assembled pack, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. Looking for something. Hunting for something. Looking for me. Alpha Gregor. The king's voice was deep and controlled. Your pack appears well organized. Thank you, your majesty, my father said, his usual arrogance tempered by submission to superior power. We pride ourselves on strength and discipline. So I see. The king's eyes continued scanning the crowd, and I felt the exact moment his gaze passed over me, pressure like lightning about to strike. Tell me about your pack structure. Alphas, betas, omegas. How do you maintain order? Through strength, your majesty. The strong lead, the weak serve. We don't tolerate failure or weakness. Any wolf who can't contribute is removed. Removed. The king's tone went cold. Meaning killed. Meaning given choice to leave or prove their worth. We're a warrior pack. We don't carry dead weight. I could feel the king's disapproval even from 20 feet away. But he didn't argue, didn't need to. His authority was absolute. If he wanted Ironclaw dismantled, he could do it with a single command. Instead, he moved through the crowd, his presence making wolves drop their eyes in submission as he passed. Getting closer to where I stood among the kitchen workers. Following his nose, tracking a scent only he could detect. My scent. Beneath the binding cloth, beneath the masculine clothing, beneath 3 years of carefully constructed disguise, he was tracking me. He stopped directly in front of me.
You.
What's your name? I could not answer. Alpha command from the king himself was impossible to resist. Leo, your majesty.
Lao.
He said it like he was tasting the name, finding it wrong. Look at me. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to keep my eyes down, to not draw any more attention. But his command pulled at me like physical force, and my wolf was practically singing with the need to obey our mate. I raised my eyes to meet his, and the world narrowed to just the two of us. Recognition. The mate bond snapping into place with enough force that I gasped, seeing the same shock and certainty reflected in his amber eyes. He felt it too. Felt the pull, the connection, the absolute knowledge that we belonged to each other. But his expression was confused. Searching. Like he was seeing two different things simultaneously. The boy I appeared to be, and the truth his wolf knew I was hiding. Come with me, he said, his voice dropping to something more private despite the crowd around us.
We need to speak. Now.
It wasn't a request. It was a command from the Alpha King to one of his subjects. I had no choice but to follow as he turned and walked toward the building Gregor had designated as guest quarters during the inspection. Behind me, I felt my father's attention, Gregor watching Leo being singled out by the Alpha King, wondering what this meant, calculating whether it was opportunity or a threat. I followed the king into a private room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my bound chest. This was it. The moment my disguise failed. The moment 3 years of hiding ended. The moment I either gained a mate or lost my life. The door closed behind us with terrible finality, and I waited for everything I'd built to protect myself to come crashing down. The Alpha King just singled her out. He can smell his mate but sees a boy. The confusion is real and Leola is panicking. What happens when Chris realizes the truth? Hit subscribe because the next line reveals everything, and her father is going to lose his mind when the Alpha King claims his dead daughter. The moment the door closed, the Alpha King's power filled the room like a physical presence, not aggressive, but overwhelming, impossible to ignore. I dropped to my knees instinctively, submission programmed into every wolf's biology when facing an alpha this powerful. Stand up, he said, but his voice was gentler than I expected. I'm not going to hurt you. I stood on trembling legs, still not meeting his eyes. If I didn't look directly at him, maybe I could maintain some distance. Maybe I could. Look at me, Leo. The command in his voice was undeniable. I looked up and saw him studying me with an intensity that felt like being dissected. Those amber eyes tracking every detail, my bound posture, my masculine clothing, the way I held myself like I was constantly bracing for impact. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly. "What are you hiding?" "Nothing, Your Majesty. I'm just—" "You're my fated mate," he interrupted, and the certainty in his voice made my carefully constructed world start crumbling. "I can feel the bond. I can smell you beneath whatever you're using to hide your scent. My wolf recognized you the moment I entered this territory, but nothing about you makes sense. So tell me the truth. What are you really?" I couldn't breathe. The binding cloth around my chest was too tight, the room was too small, and the most powerful alpha in 5 kingdoms was staring at me with a mix of certainty and confusion that meant my secret was seconds from being completely exposed. "You don't understand," I managed, my voice breaking into higher registers I'd trained myself never to use. "If anyone finds out, he'll kill me. My father will." "Your father?" The king's expression sharpened. "Alpha Gregor is your father? He doesn't know. He doesn't remember. He had my mother killed when I was born because the words caught in my throat. 3 years of hiding, 3 years of fear, all coming apart in this moment.
Please don't make me say it. Please.
If he finds out I'm alive, if he realizes, you're female." The king said it with absolute certainty, and the last of my disguise shattered. "You're disguised as a male to survive in Ironclaw, and Alpha Gregor doesn't know his daughter is alive." I made a sound that was half sob, half hysterical laugh. Of course the Alpha King had figured it out. Of course he'd seen through 3 years of careful hiding in minutes. He had my mother killed for giving birth to a daughter instead of a son, for disappointing him, for being weak enough to produce weak offspring. If he finds out I exist, that I've been hiding here all this time as Leo, he'll kill you," the king finished, and the fury in his voice made me flinch despite knowing it wasn't directed at me. "You've been living in disguise for how long?" 3 years. Since I was 13. I was still shaking, still not quite processing that I was having this conversation. My Aunt Ruth helped me, cut my hair, taught me to bind my chest, helped me become Leo because being Leola meant dying. It was the only way to survive. "Leola." He said my real name like he was testing it, seeing how it felt. "Your actual name is Leola Horn." "Yes, Your Majesty. And you're my fated mate." Not a question. A statement of absolute fact. Yes. I felt the bond the moment you arrived. My wolf recognized you. I forced myself to meet his eyes despite every instinct screaming to look away. "But you can't claim me. If you try, if my father finds out what I am, he'll see it as theft of his property. Pack law. Pack law says fated mates supersede all other bonds including family," the king interrupted firmly. "You're not Gregor's property. You're my mate, which means you're under my protection. He has no legal claim on you once the bond is acknowledged. You don't understand what he's like. What Ironclaw is like. Gregor doesn't accept defiance. If you try to take me, he'll fight you despite your authority. He'll see it as challenge to his power. Let him challenge me." The king's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I'm Alpha King. His power means nothing compared to mine. And you're my mate. Do you really think I'd leave you here after learning you've been hiding as a boy for 3 years just to survive your own father's brutality?" "But I'm not." I gestured helplessly at myself.
I'm nobody.
Just a kitchen worker. A hidden Omega who isn't even brave enough to exist as herself. Why would you want? You survived. He cut through my self-deprecation with absolute conviction. You survived 3 years in one of the most brutal packs in my territories. You endured daily pain from binding your chest, constant fear of discovery, exhaustion from maintaining a disguise every single moment. And you kept going, because giving up meant death. That's not weakness, Leola. That's incredible strength. It's cowardice, I said bitterly. I hid instead of fighting. I erased myself to survive. You adapted to survive. There's nothing cowardly about that. He took a step closer, and I forced myself not to back away. I know you don't trust me yet. I know 3 years of hiding has taught you to trust no one. But you're my mate, Leola. The moon goddess herself designated us for each other. So trust me now. Trust that I will protect you from your father, from Ironclaw, from anyone who tries to hurt you. And if I do, if I trust you and acknowledge the bond and my father finds out, my voice was barely a whisper. He'll try to kill me. He'll see me as betrayal, as deception, as everything wrong with Omega weakness. He'll have to go through me first, the king said flatly. And I promise you, Leola, he won't succeed. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that the mate bond meant safety, that the Alpha King's protection was absolute. But I'd learned young that trusting powerful wolves got you killed. What do you want me to do? I finally asked. Remove the disguise. Let me see you properly. His voice was gentle. Let me see my mate as she actually is, not as she's been forced to hide herself. My hands went automatically to my chest, to the binding cloth that had been my armor for 3 years. If I remove this, if anyone sees, no one's going to see except me. Not until we're ready to make the claim public. He moved to the door, locking it and pulling curtains over the window. You're safe here, Leola. Just us. Just for now. I'd been Leo for so long I'd almost forgotten how to be Leola. But I unwound the binding cloth with shaking hands, feeling my ribs expand properly for the first time in months. Each breath hurt. Freedom after restriction always did. The cloth fell away, and I stood there in just my oversized shirt, chest finally able to move naturally, and met the king's gaze with something between terror and defiance. This was me, Leola Horn, the hidden daughter, the girl who'd erased herself to survive. The Alpha King's fated mate. Beautiful, he said quietly, and the wonder in his voice made my throat tight. You're absolutely beautiful.
I'm a mess, y corrected.
I'm damaged and terrified, and I don't know how to be female anymore. Then we'll figure it out together. He extended his hand, not demanding, not commanding, just offering. Will you let me help you? Will you trust me long enough to get you out of Ironclaw and somewhere safe? I looked at his hand, looked at his face, looked at the future I never let myself imagine because imagining meant hoping, and hoping in Ironclaw meant eventual destruction. But he was my mate. The moon goddess herself had chosen him for me. And maybe, just maybe, that meant something. I took his hand, feeling the mate bond surge at the contact.
Yes.
I'll trust you.
Good.
His grip was warm and steady. Then let's get you out of here before your father figures out what's happening. He already knows something's wrong. You singled me out. He'll be watching, calculating. A knock on the door interrupted us. Then Alpha Gregor's voice, carefully respectful, but with an edge that only I would recognize as dangerous. Your Majesty? Is everything well? I noticed you took one of our kitchen workers aside. If there's a problem, I can address it. The king looked at me. A silent question. Do you want to face him now? I shook my head frantically.
Not yet.
Not before I was ready. Everything's fine, Alpha Gregor. The king called through the door. Leo is helping me understand your pack's kitchen operations. Very efficient system you've implemented.
Ah, good.
Leo has proven himself useful in that area. My father's voice made my skin crawl. Should I have him continue the inspection with you? No need. I've learned what I needed to know. The king's hand tightened on mine reassuringly. I'll return to the main inspection shortly. Of course, Your Majesty. Footsteps retreating. My father is leaving, but not forgetting. He'd remember that the Alpha King took interest in Leo. He'd wonder why. And eventually, he'd figure it out. We need to move quickly, the king said once we were certain Gregor was gone. He's going to investigate who Leo really is. When he does, he'll realize I'm Leola, his supposedly dead daughter. I was shaking again, fear overwhelming the brief moment of safety. He'll kill me before letting you claim me. I'm his property in his mind, even if I've been hiding. Especially because I've been hiding, I made him look foolish by surviving when he thought I was dead. He's not going to touch you, the king said with absolute conviction. But we need to be strategic. If I just take you now, he can claim I'm violating pack autonomy by stealing his pack member without cause. I need to announce the mate bond publicly. Make it clear your mind by divine designation, not by my choice overriding his authority. Announcing it publicly means everyone will know I've been lying for 3 years. It means everyone will know you survived impossible circumstances through incredible strength. He pulled me closer, his alpha presence wrapping around me protectively. Are you ready to stop hiding, Leola? Are you ready to be seen as who you really are? Was I ready? I'd been Leo for 3 years. Being Leola again meant vulnerability, meant facing the Ironclaw wolves who'd treated Leo as unremarkable would now treat Leola as either weakness to exploit or threat to eliminate. But staying hidden meant staying afraid forever. Meant living in disguise, bound and uncomfortable and exhausted. And I had a mate now. The most powerful alpha in 5 kingdoms, who was looking at me like I mattered, like I was valuable, like I was worth protecting. Yes, I said, the word feeling like jumping off a cliff. I'm ready. Then let's do this properly. The king's smile was fierce and proud. Let's show Ironclaw exactly what their weak Omega daughter has become. We'd barely started planning when the second knock came, harder this time, more demanding. Your Majesty, a guard's voice, urgent and panicked. Alpha Gregor requires an immediate audience. He says it's about Leo. He says he knows what Leo is hiding. My blood ran cold. He'd figured out. Somehow, impossibly fast, my father had discovered the truth. He knows, I whispered. Moon goddess, he knows. Then we face him together. The king said firmly, You're not alone anymore, Leola. Whatever happens next, I'm with you. The door burst open despite being locked, Gregor's alpha authority overriding simple mechanisms. My father stood there, fury radiating from him in waves, and his eyes locked on me with recognition and rage. You, he snarled. My supposedly dead daughter. You've been hiding here for 3 years as Leo, making a fool of me, making my entire pack look foolish. Alpha Gregor, the king's voice cut through the fury with absolute authority. Step away from my mate. Now. Gregor's expression went from fury to shocked disbelief. Your mate? This Omega is your fated mate.
Yes.
And by divine law, she's under my protection. You have no claim on her. She's my daughter. Gregor roared. She's been deceiving my pack, hiding under my nose, making me look incompetent. She's been surviving your brutality, the king corrected coldly. She's been hiding because you had her mother killed, and she knew she'd face the same fate.
So, she adapted.
And now she's mine. Mate law supersedes family law. You lost any claim on her the moment the bond formed. I refuse to accept this, Gregor said, his alpha dominance pushing against the king's. She's worthless. A weak Omega who couldn't even survive as herself. She's not worthy of being Luna Queen. That's not your decision, the king said, and the power in his voice made even my father step back. The moon goddess chose Leola as my mate. Your opinion is irrelevant. She's leaving Ironclaw with me, and you will not interfere. Then you're stealing from me, violating my pack's autonomy. I'm claiming my mate, which is my right under divine and territorial law. The king moved to stand between me and my father, a physical barrier of protection. Challenge it if you want, Gregor. But know that challenging mate law is treason against the crown. And I will respond accordingly. The threat hung in the air. Acknowledge the bond and let me go, or commit treason and face the Alpha King's full wrath. Gregor looked between us, calculation visible in his eyes. Then his gaze landed on me with such hatred I actually felt it physically. Fine, he said coldly. Take the worthless Omega. She's been nothing but disappointment since birth. But know this, daughter. You'll never be worthy of him. You'll always be the weak, hiding creature who couldn't even survive as herself. That's your legacy." The words should have hurt. 3 years ago, they would have destroyed me. But I'd spent 3 years surviving what should have killed me. I'd adapted, endured, and outlasted my father's brutality. And now I had a mate who saw strength where Gregor saw weakness. "My legacy," I said clearly, my real voice ringing through the room for the first time in 3 years, "is surviving you despite everything you did to ensure I wouldn't." That's more than enough for me. Gregor's fury was palpable, but the king's presence kept him from acting on it. He turned and stormed from the room, leaving me shaking but still standing. "That went better than expected," the king said with dark humor. "I thought he'd actually try to fight me for you." "He will," I said quietly. "Just not here. Not where witnesses can confirm he committed treason. He'll find another way to try to kill me. He always does. Then we'll be ready." The king pulled me close, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt genuinely safe. "You're not alone anymore, Leola. Whatever he tries, we face it together." I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the mate bond meant safety. But I knew my father, knew Ironclaw, knew that accepting defeat wasn't something Gregor was capable of. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Gregor knows. The father's confrontation was intense, and he basically called Leola worthless before letting her go. But you know he's planning revenge. Hit subscribe button because the next covers Leola's transformation from hidden boy to claimed mate and the assassination attempt that proves Gregor is not done with his disappointing daughter. Leaving Ironclaw should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like walking through fire while knowing I'd been burned before and probably would be again. The king, Chris, he'd insisted I call him Chris when we were alone, had arranged for immediate departure. No waiting, no prolonged goodbyes, just swift extraction from the territory that had been my prison for 3 years. "We're taking a small guard detail," he explained as we prepared to leave. "Enough to ensure safety, but not so many it looks like I'm expecting war. Your father will be watching how we leave. Any sign of weakness, and he'll see it as opportunity. He'll see anything as an opportunity," I said, still wearing Leo's clothes because I didn't have anything else. The binding cloth was gone. Chris had insisted I stop wearing it, said breathing properly was more important than disguise now that the secret was exposed. But without it, I felt naked despite being fully dressed. Vulnerable in ways I'd trained myself not to be for 3 years. "You're shaking," Chris observed gently. "Are you cold or scared?" "Both." "Neither." "I don't know." I wrapped my arms around myself. I've been Leo for so long I don't remember how to be Leola. How to move like a woman. How to speak without forcing my voice low. How to exist as myself rather than as a disguise. "Then we'll figure it out together. There's no rush. You don't have to immediately become someone you haven't been in years. Take time to remember who you are beneath the survival mechanisms." The Ironclaw wolves watched us prepare to leave, their expressions ranging from confusion to barely concealed hostility. They'd known Leo as an unremarkable kitchen worker. Now they knew Leo was actually Leola, their alpha's supposedly dead daughter, the Alpha King's fated mate, and proof that Gregor had been made a fool of for 3 years. "They hate me," I murmured, feeling the weight of their stares. "They hate that you survived when they expected you to die. That's different from actually hating you." Chris's hand found mine, the mate bond humming at the contact. "Let them stare. You're leaving." "They're not." Gregor appeared as we were about to depart, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes promising violence. "Your Majesty, a word before you leave with my daughter." Chris's hand tightened on mine. "Make it quick. Just a reminder, she's weak. She's spent 3 years hiding because she couldn't face reality. That weakness won't disappear just because you've claimed her. When she fails you, when she proves herself unworthy of being Luna Queen, remember I warned you. Your warnings are noted and dismissed, Chris said coldly. Leola survived 3 years of circumstances that would have broken most wolves. If that's a weakness in your estimation, I'd hate to see what you consider strength. You'll see soon enough. Weakness always reveals itself eventually. Gregor's gaze shifted to me. Enjoy your temporary elevation, daughter. It won't last. The threat was clear even if the words were carefully chosen to avoid direct challenge to the Alpha King's authority. My father fully intended to prove I was unworthy, one way or another. We left Ironclaw in mid-afternoon, the pack's hostile stares following us until we crossed the territory border. The moment we passed into neutral land between territories, I felt like I could breathe properly for the first time in years. It's over, I said, half disbelief. I'm actually out of Ironclaw. I never thought. I didn't let myself think. It's over, Chris confirmed. You're free of that place and free of your father's authority. Now we focus on what comes next. What came next was traveling to the Royal Palace, Chris's primary residence, the seat of his power as Alpha King. The journey would take 3 days, even moving quickly, which meant 3 days of slowly transforming from Leo back to Leola. The first night, we stopped at an inn in neutral territory. Chris arranged for a private room for me, separate from where he and the guard stayed. You're safe here, he said, showing me the room. Door locks, guards outside, and I'm right next door if you need anything. Rest. Actually rest, not just survival sleep. I don't know how to rest, I admitted. I've been alert for 3 years straight. Sleeping deeply meant possibly not waking up if someone discovered my disguise. Then stay alert tonight if you need to. But know that you're protected. No one's going to hurt you here. I tried to rest, tried to let go of the constant vigilance. But years of fear didn't disappear in a single night, and I spent most of it staring at the ceiling, listening for threats that didn't come. The second day, Chris had female clothing brought from a nearby town. Simple dress, practical boots, things that would fit properly instead of the oversized male clothing I'd been drowning in for 3 years. You don't have to wear them if you're not ready, he said, offering the bundle. But I thought you might want the option. I took the dress, feeling the soft fabric between my fingers. When was the last time I'd worn anything feminine? I couldn't remember. Pre-disguised Leola was a stranger I'd almost forgotten existed. I changed in privacy, struggling with fastenings I hadn't used in years, adjusting to how different my body felt in clothes designed for it rather than designed to hide it. When I finally emerged, I felt exposed in ways that had nothing to do with the dress being revealing. It wasn't. But it was feminine, which meant visible, which meant vulnerable. Chris's expression when he saw me made the vulnerability worth it. Wonder and pride, and something deeper that the mate bond amplified until I could feel his emotions as clearly as my own. You look, he stopped, searching for words. You look like yourself. Like Leola instead of Leo. I feel like a stranger, I admitted. Is this really me? Or just another disguise? Feminine instead of masculine? It's you figuring out who you are now that survival doesn't require constant disguise. That takes time. He offered his hand. Want to take a walk? Stretch your legs. See neutral territory without fear. We walked through the small village near the inn, and I marveled at the ordinary scenes. Wolves shopping at market stalls, children playing without fear, women moving freely, without the constant vigilance I'd learned in Ironclaw. This was what normal looked like. What life could be when you weren't constantly surviving. Is it always like this in your territories? I asked. Peaceful and ordinary? Most of the time. There are still conflicts, still problems that need addressing. But systematic abuse like what Ironclaw practices? That's not normal, Leola. That's not how most packs operate. Gregor always said we were strong because we were harsh. That mercy was weakness, and only the brutal survived. Gregor is wrong about many things. That's one of them. Chris stopped walking, turning to face me fully. You showed mercy to yourself by creating Leo, giving yourself away to survive when direct confrontation would have gotten you killed. That's not a weakness. That's strategic brilliance from a 13-year-old child who had no one to protect her. The validation made my throat tight. I'd spent 3 years thinking of Leo as cowardice, as shameful hiding that proved Gregor was right about my weakness. Hearing the Alpha King call it strategic brilliance reframed everything. Thank you, I managed, for seeing it that way, for seeing me that way. I see you as you are, strong, adaptable, worthy of being Luna Queen despite having no preparation for the role. We'll figure out the rest as we go. The third day, we reached the royal palace. It was a massive, sprawling structure that housed the Alpha King's pack, his guards, his advisors, and the complex political machinery that kept 5 kingdoms functioning under unified authority. I felt incredibly small looking at it. Small and overwhelmed, and convinced there was no way I belonged here. Breathe, Chris said, feeling my panic through the bond. It's just a building. Impressive building, but still just stone and wood and wolves who ultimately answer to me. It's your home, your seat of power. And I'm a kitchen worker from a brutal pack who's been hiding as a boy. I don't know how to be Luna Queen. You don't have to know yet. You just have to be willing to learn. He squeezed my hand reassuringly.
Come on.
Let me show you our home. Our home. The casual possessiveness of it should have scared me. Instead, it felt grounding. This wasn't just his territory I was entering, it was ours. Mate bond made it ours. The palace staff reacted to my arrival with barely concealed shock, the Alpha King returning from inspection with a mate no one had known existed. A mate who looked young and uncertain, and nothing like what people expected of Luna Queen. Your Majesty, an older beta woman approached, bowing respectfully. Welcome home. And welcome, Luna Queen. I'm Sarah, head of household staff. If you need anything at all, please let me know. Thank you, I said, my real voice still feeling strange after years of forcing it lower. I appreciate that. Sarah's expression softened slightly. You look exhausted, if I may say so. Let me show you to the Luna Queen's chambers. You can rest and settle in. The Luna Queen's chambers were absurdly luxurious, a bedroom larger than the entire space I'd shared with 3 roommates in Ironclaw, a bathroom with actual hot water and privacy, a sitting room with comfortable furniture and windows overlooking gardens I could hardly believe existed. This is too much, I said, feeling panic rising. I can't. It's exactly right, Chris corrected gently. You're Luna Queen. This is your space. You can change anything you want about it, but the baseline is comfortable and safe. That's what you deserve. I deserve a bunk in a kitchen worker's room. That's what I know. This is what nobles have. Not orphans who hid as boys. This is what Luna Queens have, which you are now. He pulled me close, careful and gentle despite his power. I know it's overwhelming. I know 3 days isn't enough time to process everything that's changed. But you're safe here, Leola. You can rest, recover, figure out who you are now that survival doesn't require constant disguise. Take all the time you need. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to think I could just relax into safety and let the past 3 years fade away like a bad dream. But that night, lying in absurd luxury and trying to sleep, I kept jerking awake at small noises, convinced someone had discovered the disguise, convinced Gregor had found me, convinced the safety was temporary and violence was coming. Because the thing about survival instincts, they don't disappear just because the immediate danger passes. They linger, hypervigilant, convinced the next threat is always imminent. And in this case, my instincts were right. The assassination attempt came on my 4th night in the palace, when I'd finally managed to sleep deeply enough to dream. Dreams about being Leo again, about the binding cloth suffocating me, about Gregor's fury when he discovered the deception. I woke to hands grabbing me, a cloth pressed over my mouth and nose, sweet sickly smell that I recognized from my mother's healer training. Sedative. Designed to knock out wolves without killing them. I fought on instinct, clawing, kicking, trying to scream through the cloth. But the sedative was already working, making my limbs heavy and my consciousness fuzzy. Through the haze, I heard a voice. Gregor sends his regards. Says worthless daughters don't deserve to live, especially ones who embarrass their fathers. Then darkness pulled me under completely, and my last thought was that I'd survived 3 years of hiding only to be killed for it anyway. I'd been wrong to hope. Hope in Ironclaw only ever led to destruction. Assassination attempt. Skull Gregor sent someone to kidnap/kill Leola in the palace. She finally felt safe, and it was immediately violated. Hit subscribe button because it covers Chris's fury when he discovers his mate was taken, the rescue that proves exactly why you don't touch the Alpha King's mate, and Gregor learning that threatening Leola has permanent consequences. I woke to the smell of damp stone and old blood, smells I associated with Ironclaw's punishment cells where wolves who displeased Gregor were kept before execution. My hands were bound. My head throbbed from the sedative. And when I forced my eyes open, I confirmed my worst fear. I was back in Ironclaw, in the cells beneath my father's residence, exactly where I'd spent 13 years being terrified I'd end up. Awake already? A voice from the shadows, one of Gregor's enforcers, a brutal beta named Roland who'd always enjoyed hurting weaker wolves.
Good.
The Alpha wanted you conscious for this conversation. Where's Chris? I demanded, my voice hoarse. The Alpha King will. The Alpha King will find you already dead and learn that weak Omegas don't survive leaving their packs, Roland interrupted. Gregor's message will be clear. You betrayed your pack, hid as a male to deceive him, and then ran away with the king. That's 3 crimes worthy of death. He's just delivering justice. That's not justice. That's murder. In Ironclaw, they're the same thing. Roland smiled with cruel satisfaction. Your mate will be furious, of course. But you'll be dead, and dead mates can't be avenged, only mourned. Eventually he'll move on, find a proper Luna Queen, and Ironclaw will have proven that the Alpha King's authority doesn't supersede pack traditions. The door opened, and Gregor entered. My father, the Alpha who'd had my mother killed, who'd forgotten I existed until I became inconvenient. Leola, he said, my name like a curse. My disappointing daughter. You've caused me significant embarrassment. Good, I said, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. You deserve embarrassment for everything you've done. For Mother, for the Omegas you've destroyed, for the brutal culture you've maintained. His backhand was casual but effective, pain exploding across my face hard enough to split my lip. You don't speak to me that way. You're an Omega, a worthless one who couldn't even face reality without hiding as male. You have no right to judge me. I have every right. You created Leo by being so brutal that hiding was the only survival option. Blood from my split lip tasted like iron. And Chris will destroy you for this. Kidnapping the Alpha King's mate is treason. Retrieving my runaway daughter for proper punishment is justice, Gregor corrected coldly. I'll claim you left voluntarily, that you used your mate bond to escape rightful consequences for your deception. The king has no proof otherwise. You'll be dead before he even knows where to look. He'll know. The mate bond. He'll feel when I'm in distress, when I'm hurt. The mate bond takes time to develop fully. You've only been claimed for a few days. The connection isn't strong enough yet for him to track you accurately across territories. Gregor smiled with false sympathy. You're alone, daughter. Just like you were for 3 years in my pack. No one's coming to save you. But he was wrong. I felt it through the bond. Chris's fury, his determination, his absolute certainty about my location despite Gregor's claims the connection wasn't strong enough. The mate bond might be new, but it was powerful enough that Chris knew exactly where I was and exactly how much danger I was in. He's coming, I said with more confidence than I felt. And when he gets here, you're going to regret touching his mate. Let him come. I'll explain that I was dispensing pack justice, that you chose to return to Ironclaw, that your death was unfortunate but necessary. Gregor turned to leave. Kill her. Make it quick. I want the body presentable for when the king arrives demanding explanations. Wait. I pulled against the bonds, panic overriding pride. You're really going to kill me? Your own daughter? I killed your mother for giving birth to you. Killing you directly just closes the circle. He paused at the door. You should have stayed hidden as Leo. At least then you were useful. As Leola, you're just another disappointment. The door closed with terrible finality, leaving me alone with Roland and the certain knowledge that he was going to kill me in the next few minutes. Any last words? Roland asked, pulling a knife designed for clean executions. Some Omegas like to beg. Others pray to the moon goddess. Your choice. Just one thing, I said, meeting his eyes despite the terror. When the Alpha King tears you apart for touching his mate, remember, I warned you this was a bad idea.
Roland looked.
Bold words from a wolf about to die. I almost respect. The explosion shook the entire building. Not a metaphorical explosion. Actual detonation of power so immense it made the stone walls crack and the air itself vibrate with fury. Alpha King dominance unleashed without restraint, without control, without anything except protective rage.
Chris had arrived.
And he was done being diplomatic. The sounds above us were catastrophic, fighting, screaming, the wet tearing noises of wolves being destroyed by something far more powerful than they could handle. Gregor's enforcers trying to stop the Alpha King and discover exactly how futile that resistance was. Roland's confidence evaporated. That's not. He shouldn't be able to find. The mate bond doesn't care what you think is possible, I said, feeling Chris getting closer through our connection. He's coming for me, and you're in his way. The door exploded inward, not opened, not broken, literally exploded into splinters by force that should have been impossible. Chris stood in the doorway, and he was terrifying. Covered in blood that wasn't his, eyes glowing with alpha fury, power radiating from him in waves that made Roland drop to his knees in instinctive submission. Mine, Chris growled, the word barely human. You touched mine. Roland tried to speak, to explain, to beg. Chris didn't care. His hand closed on Roland's throat with speed that shouldn't be possible, and the snap that followed was quick and brutal. Then he was beside me, cutting my bonds with the same knife Roland had planned to use on me, pulling me against his chest with desperate gentleness despite the violence he'd just committed. Are you hurt? His voice was rough with barely contained fury. Did they? Gregor hit me. That's all. Roland was going to, but you got here first. I was shaking, adrenaline and relief and delayed terror all hitting simultaneously. How did you find me so fast? The mate bond. The moment you were in distress, I felt it. Tracked you across territories through Gregor's attempts to hide your location. He examined my face, his expression darkening at the split lip and bruise forming across my cheek. He hit you. Your own father hit you. He did worse to my mother. This is nothing compared to. It's not nothing. Chris's fury was building again, the kind of rage that broke things. Where is he? Where's Gregor? Upstairs, probably. He left orders to kill me, then went to prepare his excuses for when you arrived. I grabbed Chris's arm, trying to ground him through the bond. Don't kill him. He's not worth the political complications. He kidnapped my mate, ordered her execution. He's absolutely worth killing. Then kill him legally. Charge him with treason, hold a trial, execute him properly. Don't just murder him. That makes you the brutal one. Chris looked at me like I was insane. You're asking me to show mercy to the wolf who just tried to have you killed? I'm asking you to be better than him. To prove that power doesn't require his kind of casual brutality. My voice shook but held steady. Please. For me. Show Ironclaw that there's a better way than just answering violence with more violence. He wanted to refuse. I could feel his desire to tear through the building until he found Gregor and destroyed him for touching his mate. But he could also feel my desperate need for this to end differently, for justice instead of just revenge. Fine, he said roughly. But he's answering for this.
Publicly.
With witnesses and proper charges and execution for treason. Good. That's all I'm asking. We emerged from the cells to find the building above destroyed. Chris had carved a path of violence through Gregor's enforcers, leaving broken wolves in his wake.
Most were dead.
The survivors had fled or were surrendering to Chris's guards who'd arrived shortly after their king's initial assault. Gregor stood in the main hall, surrounded by royal guards, looking furious and trapped. Your Majesty, there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Chris interrupted coldly. You kidnapped my mate, held her in your cells, ordered her execution. Those aren't misunderstandings, they're treasonous acts against the crown. She's my daughter. I was exercising pack authority. She's my mate, which supersedes your pack authority completely. Chris's hand tightened on my shoulder, keeping me close. You will stand trial for treason. You will answer publicly for kidnapping and attempting to murder the Luna Queen. And you will face execution for your crimes. You can't. I'm an alpha pack law. Pack law doesn't protect you from the consequences of attacking the Alpha King's mate. Chris's voice dropped to something more dangerous. You gambled that I wouldn't find her in time, that killing her would send a message about pack autonomy. You were wrong. The only message being sent is what happens to wolves who threaten what's mine. They arrested Gregor there in his own hall, in front of his remaining pack members, stripping him of alpha authority and binding him with silver chains designed to prevent escape. His fury was palpable, but the silver prevented him from acting on it. This isn't over, Gregor snarled as they led him away.
She's weak.
She'll fail you. And when she does, you'll remember I was right about her worthlessness. The only thing I'll remember is that you tried to murder my mate and paid for it with your life, Chris corrected flatly.
Take him.
We hold the trial tomorrow. Execution the day after. Once Gregor was secured and the immediate danger had passed, Chris turned his full attention to me. Let's get you home. Actual home, where you're safe. I was safe before, I pointed out. They got into the palace, into my chambers, drugged me, and took me without anyone stopping them. That's being corrected. Anyone involved in breaching palace security is being identified and dealt with. His jaw tightened. You're right that I failed to protect you properly. That won't happen again. Don't make promises you can't keep. Determined wolves will always find ways to hurt the things you protect. Then I'll be more determined to stop them. He pulled me closer, and I felt his fear through the bond, terror that he'd been too late, that Gregor had succeeded, that he'd lost his mate barely a week after finding her. I can't lose you, Leola. The thought of arriving and finding you already dead. But I'm not dead. You got here in time.
I'm okay.
You're hurt.
Traumatized.
Probably going to have nightmares about being kidnapped from what should have been safe sanctuary. Probably, I agreed. But I'm alive. And Gregor is finally going to face consequences for everything he's done. That's worth something. We returned to the palace with Gregor secured for trial and Ironclaw pack leaderless and in chaos. Chris left a temporary administrator to manage the territory while proper leadership could be established, someone who wouldn't perpetuate the brutal culture Gregor had built. Back in my chambers with significantly increased security, I finally broke down. The terror I'd been suppressing, the exhaustion from years of fear, the overwhelming relief that I'd survived when I'd been certain I wouldn't. All of it hit at once, and I collapsed into Chris's arms, sobbing. I was so scared. I admitted through tears. I was sure he'd kill me before you arrived. That I'd survived 3 years hiding as Leo, just to die anyway. But you didn't die. You survived again. Like you always do. Chris held me while I fell apart, his steady presence the only thing keeping me grounded. You're the strongest wolf I've ever met, Leola. And I'm going to make sure Gregor's execution demonstrates what happens to anyone who threatens that strength. Will killing him actually change anything? Will it make Ironclaw better, or just create a power vacuum filled by whoever's most brutal? It'll change that he can't hurt you anymore. That's enough for me. Chris pulled back slightly to meet my eyes. But you're right that justice needs to be more than just execution. So we'll reform Ironclaw too. Make it into something better than what Gregor built. Make it safe for wolves like you, wolves who deserve protection instead of constant threat. That's a lot of work. Good thing we have time to do it properly. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to think we could actually transform Ironclaw from brutal to functional, that Gregor's execution would mark real change rather than just revenge. But I'd learned not to hope too hard. Hope had a way of getting destroyed in places like Ironclaw. Still, I was alive. I had a mate who'd torn through an entire building to rescue me. And my father was finally going to face consequences for his brutality. That was more than I dared hope for 3 years ago when I'd become Leo to survive. Maybe it was enough to start building something better. Chris destroyed half of Ironclaw, rescuing her. Gregor is arrested for treason. Roland is dead. And Leola finally broke down after holding it together through kidnapping and near execution. Hit subscribe because the next chapter of the story covers Gregor's trial, the public execution, and Leola's first appearance as actual Luna Queen in front of wolves who need to learn what happens when you mess with the Alpha King's mate. Gregor's trial happened the next day in the palace's Grand Judgment Hall, massive chamber designed specifically for holding wolves accountable for crimes against the crown. Every alpha, beta, and notable wolf from surrounding territories had been summoned to witness, making this not just a trial, but a public demonstration of what happened when you threaten the Alpha King's mate. I didn't want to attend. The thought of facing my father again, of hearing him defend his actions, made my stomach turn. But Chris insisted my presence was necessary. He needs to see that you survived his attempt to kill you, Chris explained as we prepared. The wolves witnessing need to see their Luna Queen standing strong despite being kidnapped and nearly executed. Your survival is part of the message. What message exactly are we sending? That threatening you is fatal mistake. That mate bonds are sacred and violating them is treason. That brutal alphas like Gregor don't get to hide behind pack tradition when they commit crimes. His hand found mine, the bond steady between us. You don't have to speak if you don't want to.
Just be there.
Let them see you. So I dressed in formal Luna Queen attire, clothes far more elaborate than anything I'd worn in my life, designed to project authority I absolutely didn't feel. The bruise on my face from Gregor's hit was still visible despite healing, a physical reminder of exactly what was being tried today. The judgment hall filled with hundreds of witnesses, wolves who'd traveled from every territory to see the Alpha King's justice delivered to a pack alpha who'd committed treason. Their expressions ranged from curious to openly hostile. Not all of them agreed that Gregor deserved execution for retrieving his daughter. Chris took his position on the judgment throne, and I stood beside him in the Luna Queen's designated place, visible, obvious, impossible to ignore. Every eye tracked me, and I felt their assessment. Too young. Too damaged. Too clearly not equipped to be Luna Queen. Let them doubt. I'd survived worse than their judgment. Bring in the accused, Chris commanded, his alpha authority making even the witnesses submit slightly. They led Gregor in, still bound in silver chains, his expression defiant despite the restraints. He looked at me with such hatred I actually felt it physically, his disappointment made manifest, his weak daughter who dared to survive when she should have died. Alpha Gregor Horn, Chris said formally, you are charged with treason against the crown, specifically kidnapping and attempting to murder Luna Queen Leola, my fated mate and your daughter. How do you plead? Not guilty, Gregor said immediately. I was exercising pack justice against a wolf who deceived me, hid in my territory for 3 years disguised as male, and then abandoned her pack. Those are crimes under pack law. Pack law doesn't supersede mate law, Chris corrected coldly. The moment Leola and I bonded, she became Luna Queen. Your authority over her ended completely. Retrieving her was kidnapping. Ordering her execution was attempted regicide. There's no interpretation of law that makes those actions legal. She's my daughter. She's my mate, which is the only relationship that matters legally. Chris's voice carried absolute conviction. You don't get to claim pack authority over the Luna Queen. No alpha does. Then the law is wrong, Gregor said bluntly. Mate bonds shouldn't supersede pack hierarchy. Omegas shouldn't be able to escape consequences just because they seduce powerful alphas. Leola didn't seduce anyone, Chris interrupted dangerously. We're fated mates designated by the moon goddess herself. Your daughter survived 3 years of circumstances you created through your brutality. She earned her position through strength, not manipulation. She earned nothing. She hid as a boy because she was too weak to face reality as female. That's not strength. That's cowardice. The words should have hurt. 3 years ago, they would have destroyed me. But I'd spent the past week being told I was strong by the most powerful alpha in 5 kingdoms. Gregor's opinion didn't matter anymore. May I speak? I asked Chris quietly. He looked surprised but nodded. The floor is yours, Luna Queen. I stepped forward, feeling every eye on me, feeling the weight of judgment and doubt and curiosity. Let them look. Let them see what Gregor's weak daughter had become. Alpha Gregor says I'm weak because I hid as male to survive, I said, my voice carrying through the silent hall. He's right that I hid, but he's wrong about why. I didn't hide because I was too weak to face reality. I hid because the reality he created in Ironclaw meant certain death for female Omegas. My mother was killed for giving birth to a daughter instead of a son. Other Omega women were used and discarded, their lives worth nothing beyond servicing male wolves' needs. That wasn't weakness on my part, that was survival in response to systematic brutality. You should have accepted your place, Gregor spat. Omegas serve. That's divine order. Divine order doesn't include murdering Omegas for disappointing you. Divine order doesn't include creating a culture so brutal that children have to erase their own identities to survive. I met his gaze directly despite every instinct screaming to look away. You want to claim I'm weak? I survived 3 years in your pack while you didn't even realize your daughter was alive. That's not my weakness. That's your failure as alpha and as father. Murmurs rippled through the witnesses, some approving, some skeptical, all reassessing. The question before this court, Chris said, reclaiming authority, is whether Alpha Gregor's actions constitute treason. The evidence is clear. He kidnapped the Luna Queen from royal residence. He held her in his cells. He ordered her execution. Witnesses have confirmed all of this. The only question is whether punishment is warranted. The punishment must fit the crime, one of the witnessing alphas said, a wolf I didn't recognize. Gregor believed he was exercising pack authority. His intent matters. His intent was to murder my mate, Chris corrected flatly. Intent doesn't mitigate that crime. But pack tradition. Pack tradition ends where mate bonds begin. That's law. That's been law for centuries. Gregor knew this and chose to violate it anyway. Chris's alpha dominance emphasized each word. He gambled that killing Leola before I could respond would send a message about pack autonomy. Instead, his actions demonstrate why mate law supersedes all other bonds, because fated mates are sacred, and anyone who violates that sanctity faces maximum consequences. The trial continued for hours. Witnesses testifying about what they'd seen, legal arguments about the boundaries of pack authority versus mate law, Gregor repeatedly insisting he'd been justified in retrieving his property. But the outcome was never really in doubt. The evidence was overwhelming. The crime was clear, and Chris's authority as Alpha King meant his judgment was final. Alpha Gregor Horn, Chris pronounced once all testimony was complete. You are found guilty of treason against the crown, kidnapping of the Luna Queen, and attempted regicide. The sentence is death by execution, to be carried out tomorrow at dawn. Your pack will be placed under royal administration until proper leadership can be established. Your bloodline will be stripped of alpha authority permanently. Do you have anything to say? Just this, Gregor said, his hatred focused entirely on me. She'll fail you. She's weak, damaged, unworthy of being Luna Queen. And when she fails, remember I was right about her. Your opinion is irrelevant, Chris said coldly. Take him. We execute at dawn. They led Gregor away, still defiant, still convinced he'd been right despite being convicted of treason. I watched him go and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, no sense of victory. Just exhaustion and relief that this part was finally over. You okay? Chris asked once the hall had cleared and we had privacy. I don't know. I should feel something about my father being executed. But I just feel empty. Tired. Ready for this to be finished. That's normal. He was never really your father, not in any meaningful way. He was your persecutor disguised as family. Chris pulled me close carefully. Tomorrow he faces consequences. After that, we work on making sure Ironclaw becomes something better than what he built. Something where Omegas like you are protected rather than destroyed. Will that actually work? Can we really change a culture that brutal? We can try. That's all anyone can do. Try to make things better than they found them. His hand cupped my bruised cheek gently. And you'll help lead that change. The Luna Queen who survived Ironclaw's brutality is exactly the person to transform it into something functional. I'm not ready to be Luna Queen. I'm still figuring out how to be Leola after 3 years as Leo. Then we figure out together.
No rules.
No expectations beyond doing your best and learning as you go. That night, I had nightmares about Gregor. Dreams where he escaped execution, where he found me again, where this time Chris didn't arrive in time and the knife found its mark. I woke gasping, reaching for Chris through the bond, needing reassurance that he was close. He was there immediately, having been sleeping in the room next to mine, propriety demanding we not share rooms until formally mated beyond the basic bond. Bad dreams. Memories disguised as dreams. My father. The cell. The certainty I was going to die. I was shaking despite the warm room. What if the execution doesn't happen? What if something goes wrong and he escapes? He won't escape. I have triple guards, silver restraints, and my personal attention on ensuring he faces justice. Chris sat beside me, his presence grounding. But even if he did somehow escape, I'd hunt him down and end him myself. He's not touching you again, Leola. Ever. Promise? I promise. On my authority as Alpha King, and on our mate bond, Gregor will never hurt you again. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that tomorrow's execution would truly end the threat. But I'd learned not to relax until danger was completely eliminated. And Gregor had proven resourceful at causing harm even when it seemed impossible. So I spent the night waiting, hyper-vigilant, convinced something would go wrong. Dawn came without incident. The execution was scheduled for sunrise, traditional time for administering final justice, symbolic of new beginnings and the end of darkness. The entire kingdom seemed to have gathered to witness. Thousands of wolves, all of them watching as they brought Gregor to the execution platform in silver chains. I stood beside Chris, wearing formal Luna Queen attire, visible to everyone as the daughter Gregor had tried to kill. Let them see me. Let them understand what happened when you threatened the Alpha King's mate. Alpha Gregor Horn, Chris announced, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. You have been found guilty of treason, kidnapping, and attempted regicide. The sentence is death. Do you have final words? Gregor's gaze found mine in the crowd, and even facing execution, his expression was pure hatred. She'll fail you, he said, directing his words at Chris, but meaning them for me. My weak daughter will destroy everything you've built through her incompetence and Omega softness. And when it all collapses, remember I warned you. Your warning is noted and dismissed, Chris said flatly. Execute him. The executioner was efficient. One clean strike that separated Gregor's head from his body, ending the Alpha who'd ruled Ironclaw through fear and brutality for 3 decades. It was over. My father was dead. The threat was eliminated. I should have felt something: relief, grief, satisfaction. Instead, I just felt numb. Watching the wolf who'd tormented my mother and driven me into hiding die should have been cathartic. Instead, it was just done. Finished. One chapter ending so another could begin. How do you feel? Chris asked quietly as the crowd dispersed. Empty. Is that normal? Completely normal. You're processing years of trauma while standing in front of thousands of witnesses. Feeling nothing is probably your mind's way of protecting you from being overwhelmed. He squeezed my hand gently. Let's go home. You can process properly in private. Home. The palace was home now, not Ironclaw. I was Luna Queen, not Leo the kitchen worker. My father was dead, not hanging over my life as constant threat. Everything had changed in barely 2 weeks, and I had no idea if I was ready for what came next. But Chris was right. We'd figure it out together. That had to be enough. Gregor is dead. Public execution witnessed by thousands. Leola stood strong beside Chris the entire time, and the brutal Alpha who tormented her entire life is finally gone. Hit subscribe because the next phase of the story covers Leola's transformation from traumatized survivor to actual Luna Queen, the reformation of Ironclaw, and building a life beyond just survival. 3 months after Gregor's execution, I still woke up some mornings expecting to be Leo, reaching for binding cloth that was no longer there, bracing for violence that no longer came, preparing for a day of hiding that was no longer necessary. Then I'd remember. Gregor was dead. I was Luna Queen. The hiding was over. The remembering was both relief and terror every single time. You're doing it again, Chris observed from where he sat reviewing reports at the desk in our shared chambers. We'd been formally mated a month ago, a ceremony that made our bond official and complete, giving me full Luna Queen authority rather than just the title. Doing what? That thing where you wake up, panic briefly, then remember your life is different now. He set down his papers, his full attention on me. Bad dreams again? Not nightmares exactly. Just memories. Being Leo. The constant vigilance. 3 years of fear don't disappear just because the threat is gone. No, they don't. But they do fade eventually if you let them. Chris crossed the bed, sitting beside me with careful gentleness. What would help? What do you need? I don't know. Purpose maybe? Something beyond just surviving. I gestured vaguely at the luxurious chambers. The safety I still didn't quite trust. I've spent 3 years focused entirely on not dying. Now that I'm not in immediate danger, I don't know what to do with myself. Then we find you purpose. Give you work that matters beyond just existing. His expression grew thoughtful. Actually, I have something I've been meaning to discuss with you. About Ironclaw. My stomach tightened at the pack name. What about it? It's still under royal administration. We've removed the worst of Gregor's enforcers, implemented basic Omega protections, stopped the most obvious abuses. But it needs permanent leadership. Someone who understands what Ironclaw was and what it could become. Someone who survived the brutality and knows how to transform it into something functional. You want me to lead Ironclaw? I said it flatly, unable to believe what he was suggesting. Return to the pack that forced me to hide as a boy and somehow make it better? Not alone. With support, resources, and full royal authority backing your decisions. But yes, I think you're exactly the person to reform Ironclaw. You understand what needs changing because you lived through what made it brutal. I'm terrified of that place. Even thinking about going back makes my chest tight. Which is exactly why you should go back. To prove to yourself that it can't hurt you anymore. That you're not powerless Leo hiding in the kitchens. You're Luna Queen Leola with authority to reshape the entire territory. Chris took my hands, his convictions steady through our bond. You don't have to decide now.
But think about it.
Think about taking the place that tried to destroy you and transforming it into somewhere that protects wolves like you used to be. The idea was terrifying and compelling simultaneously. Return to Ironclaw, not as hidden Leo, but as Luna Queen with power to change everything that had made me suffer. It was revenge and healing wrapped together, the kind of justice that wasn't just punishment but actual transformation. I'll think about it, I said carefully. But I'm not promising anything yet. That's all I'm asking.
I did think about it.
For days, I wrestled with whether I could possibly return to Ironclaw without falling apart, whether I had the strength to lead wolves who'd tormented me, whether transformation was even possible for a culture as brutal as Gregor had built. Then I talked to other wolves who'd survived similar circumstances, Omegas from different territories who'd faced abuse and somehow found ways to not just survive but help others. Their stories gave me courage I didn't know I needed. The pack that hurts you doesn't get to define you forever. One Omega woman told me during our conversation. At some point, you have to decide whether you're going to let trauma control your life or whether you're going to use that experience to prevent others from suffering the same way. Both choices are valid. Neither is wrong. But helping others heal your own wounds in ways nothing else can. 2 weeks after Chris's initial suggestion, I told him I was ready. I'll go to Ironclaw. I'll try to reform it. But I need support, advisors, guards, wolves who understand what we're trying to build. You'll have everything you need, Chris promised immediately. Including me, whenever you want me there. Not all the time. Ironclaw needs to learn to respect Luna Queen authority, not just Alpha King power backing me up. But sometimes, when I'm overwhelmed or scared or convinced I'm failing, I'll need you. Then I'll be there. Always. Returning to Ironclaw felt surreal. The territory looked the same. Harsh northern landscape, brutal architecture designed more for defense than comfort, the constant sense of threat that permeated everything. But I was different. I arrived not as Leo, the hidden kitchen worker, but as Luna Queen Leola, with royal guards and advisors and absolute authority to change anything I deemed necessary for pack welfare. The remaining Ironclaw wolves gathered in the main courtyard, same place where I'd hidden among kitchen staff 3 months ago, terrified the Alpha King would notice me. Now they gathered because I had ordered them to, and they had no choice but to obey. I stood on the platform where Gregor used to address his pack, feeling every eye on me, feeling their skepticism and resentment and barely concealed hostility. They knew who I was, the weak daughter who'd hidden as a boy, who'd gotten their alpha executed, who was now returning with authority they didn't think I deserved. I know what you think of me, I said, my voice carrying across the silent courtyard. I know you remember Leo, the scrawny kitchen worker who kept his head down and wasn't worth noticing. I know you think I'm weak, that I hid instead of fighting, that I'm not worthy of leading this pack. Murmurs of agreement. At least they were honest about their contempt. You're right that I hid. For 3 years, I pretended to be male because being female in Ironclaw meant certain death. My mother was killed for giving birth to me instead of a son. Other Omega women were used and discarded. That's not weakness on my part. That's survival in response to systematic brutality that Alpha Gregor created and all of you maintained. The murmurs shifted, some defensive, some uncomfortable, all forced to confront their complicity. I'm not here to punish you for Gregor's crimes. I'm here to transform Ironclaw into something better than what he built. A pack where Omegas are protected rather than destroyed. Where strength is measured by character rather than just physical dominance. Where wolves don't have to hide who they are to survive. Why should we change? A beta male called out. One of the warriors, scarred and aggressive. Ironclaw's strength came from being harsh. Being brutal. Eliminating weakness. That's what made us survive in these territories. That's what made you fear. I corrected. Not respected. Not strong. Just feared. And fear-based power collapses the moment someone more brutal comes along. I'm offering you a chance to build something sustainable instead of something that requires constant violence to maintain. Pretty words from a wolf who never had to fight. You hid while we bled. I hid while I bled. I shot back. Every day for 3 years, I bowed my chest until I couldn't breathe properly. I lowered my voice until my throat ached. I erased every part of myself that might give away my gender because discovery meant death. You call that not fighting? I call it warfare, just internal instead of external. And I won, because I'm still here and Gregor is dead. Silence. They hadn't expected me to acknowledge the hiding while simultaneously claiming it as victory. Here's what's changing, I continued, using Luna Queen authority Chris had taught me to project. Omega protection laws are being implemented immediately. Any abuse of lower-ranked wolves results in punishment. Education programs will teach all pack members about their rights under royal law. Regular inspections ensure compliance. And anyone who violates these new standards answers to me personally. And if we refuse? The same beta warrior, defiant. If we decide we don't want to change, then you leave Ironclaw and find a pack that tolerates brutality. This territory operates under my authority now, which means my rules. You can adapt or you can go. Those are your only options. You can't force an entire pack to change. Watch me. The first weeks were brutal. Resistance from wolves who resented my authority, constant challenges to the new rules, several attempted sabotages of the reforms I was implementing. But I had Chris's backing, royal resources, and the absolute conviction that Ironclaw deserved better than what Gregor had created. So I persisted despite opposition, despite wolves telling me I was too weak to lead, despite my own doubts screaming that I was failing. Slowly, gradually things changed. Omegas who'd been hiding came forward, emboldened by protections that were actually enforced. Younger wolves embraced the idea that strength didn't require cruelty. Even some of the older warriors grudgingly admitted that having clear rules was better than Gregor's arbitrary violence. You're doing well, Chris observed during one of his visits. Better than most alphas manage when reforming brutal packs. I'm barely holding it together, I admitted. Every day feels like warfare. Every small victory is immediately followed by new challenges. That's normal. Reform is hard, but you're succeeding despite the difficulty. Am I succeeding? Or just delaying inevitable collapse? You're succeeding. I've seen the reports. Abuse incidents down dramatically, Omega welfare improving, pack cohesion strengthening despite initial resistance. Ironclaw is becoming something better because you're leading that transformation. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to think I was actually making a difference rather than just performing competence while internally falling apart. The real test came 6 weeks into my leadership when one of Gregor's former enforcers, a wolf named Drake who'd been too clever to get caught in the initial purges, organized an open rebellion. We don't follow Omega weakness, Drake announced to a gathering of about 30 dissatisfied wolves. Gregor made Ironclaw strong through brutality. This Luna Queen is destroying everything he built with her soft rules and weak protections. We're taking back our pack. I could have called for Chris. Could have summoned royal guards to crush the rebellion through superior force. Instead, I faced Drake directly, using every skill I'd learned both as Hidden Leo and as Luna Queen. You want to challenge my authority? I said, walking into their gathering without guards, without weapons, without anything except Luna Queen authority.
Fini.
Let's do this properly. You and me. Combat trial. Winner leads Ironclaw. Drake looked stunned. You can't be serious. You're an Omega. I'm a trained warrior. And I'm Luna Queen with absolute authority to accept combat challenges. So, either fight me or admit you're too scared to face a wolf you claim is weak. This is suicide. This is proving I'm not the weak Omega you think I am. Fight me, Drake. Let's see who's actually stronger. The combat trial happened in the training circle, witnessed by hundreds of iron-claw wolves. Drake was larger, stronger, trained in warfare. I was smaller, inexperienced in formal combat, still recovering from years of survival trauma. But I'd spent 3 years fighting invisible battles, fighting to maintain my disguise every moment, fighting to stay hidden while surrounded by threats, fighting to survive circumstances designed to kill me. This was just a different kind of fighting. Drake attacked with overwhelming force, expecting to end things quickly. I dodged, using speed and smaller size to my advantage. He was powerful but slow. I was weaker but faster. The fight lasted 10 brutal minutes, Drake landing hits that would have ended most wolves, me refusing to stay down despite the pain. Blood and sweat and desperate determination. When I finally got him on the ground, my hand at his throat in position to finish the fight, I didn't kill him. I just held him there, my knee on his chest, my voice steady despite exhaustion. I could kill you right now. Combat law says the winner decides the loser's fate. But I'm not Gregor. I don't rule through fear and murder. So here's what happens instead. You submit to my authority. You acknowledge that Ironclaw operates under my rules now. And you help implement the reforms instead of fighting them. Do that, and you keep your position. Refuse, and you're exiled permanently. Choose. Drake looked at the faces surrounding us, wolves who just watched their Luna Queen, the Omega they dismissed as weak, defeat a trained warrior despite being outmatched physically. I submit, he said, the words clearly painful. To your authority. To the new rules. Good choice. I released him and stood, ignoring how much my body hurt. Anyone else want to challenge whether an Omega can lead this pack?
Silence.
No one dared challenge after watching me win despite every disadvantage. I'd proven my point. I was Luna Queen not just through mate bond, but through actual strength, just a different kind of strength than Gregor had valued. After the combat trial, resistance decreased dramatically. Wolves who'd been skeptical started genuinely trying to adapt to the new rules. The reforms I'd implemented stuck because they'd seen I was willing to fight, literally fight, for what I believed Ironclaw should become. You terrified me during that trial, Chris admitted when he heard about it afterward. Combat against a trained warrior while you're still recovering from years of trauma? That was incredibly risky. It was necessary. They needed to see I wasn't weak, that I could lead not just through your authority, but through my own strength. Well, you proved that definitively. Reports say half the pack is slightly in love with you now for winning that fight. That's ridiculous. That's wolves respecting strength when they see it. You gave them something to respect beyond just fear. That's what good alphas and good Luna Queens do. 3 months into leading Ironclaw, I could see genuine change. The culture wasn't transformed overnight. Centuries of brutality didn't disappear in weeks. But progress was visible. Omegas felt safer. Rules were enforced consistently. Violence decreased because clear standards replaced arbitrary cruelty. I was still terrified most days. Still convinced I was failing despite evidence of success. Still struggling with trauma that didn't disappear just because circumstances improved. But I was also proud. Proud of surviving. Proud of not just surviving, but using that survival to help others. Proud of taking the pack that had forced me to hide and transforming it into somewhere that protected wolves like me. You've done well, Chris said during one of his visits, surveying the changes. Ironclaw is genuinely better because you led this transformation. It's still not perfect. There's so much more work to do. There will always be more work. That's the nature of leadership. But you've accomplished what most wolves wouldn't dare attempt, returning to the place that tried to destroy you and making it better instead of just burning it down. Some days I still want to burn it down. On those days, remember why you chose transformation instead. Remember the wolves whose lives are better because you persisted despite the difficulty. He was right. The Omegas who no longer hid in fear. The younger wolves learning that strength didn't require cruelty. The gradual shift from brutal to functional. That was worth the exhaustion. Worth the fear. Worth every difficult moment. I'd stopped being Leo, the hidden kitchen worker. I'd become Leola, the Luna Queen. And Ironclaw was becoming something better because of it. 6 months after taking the leadership of Ironclaw, I received an unexpected visitor. Ruth, my aunt, the woman who'd helped me survive by transforming me into Leo when I was 13. "You look different," she said, studying me with careful assessment. "Older. Stronger. Like yourself instead of like you're pretending to be someone else." I am myself now. Leola instead of Leo. It's strange. Good, strange, but strange. I heard about what you've done here. The reforms, the combat trial, the transformation. I'm proud of you. Ruth's eyes were wet. Your mother would be proud too. You took the pack that killed her and made it into somewhere that protects Omegas instead of destroying them. I just did what felt necessary. What I wish someone had done when Mother was alive. That's exactly what leadership is. Doing what's necessary even when it's terrifying. Ruth paused. I also came to apologize. For cutting your hair when you were 13. For helping you hide instead of fighting to change things. I was scared, and I chose survival over resistance. You were braver. You saved my life by helping me hide. There's nothing to apologize for. Maybe. But I still regret that hiding was the only option I could give you. You deserved better than becoming Leo. Leo saved me. Let me survive long enough to become Leola again. I'm grateful for that, even if the hiding was painful. We spent the afternoon talking about everything that had changed, how Ironclaw was transforming, how I was managing leadership despite constant fear of failure, how Ruth's life had been since Gregor's execution. You should come here, I suggested. Live in Ironclaw under the new system instead of the neutral territories. See what we're building.
Maybe.
But also, maybe it's better if I stay away. Let Ironclaw be your achievement without reminders of the old days. You're not a reminder of the old days. You're family, the only family I have left. Then I'll visit often. Support from a distance rather than presence that might complicate things. After Ruth left, I reflected on how different my life was from 6 months ago. Then, I'd been terrified girl hiding as a boy. Certain discovery meant death. Now, I was Luna, queen actively reshaping the pack that had tried to destroy me. The transformation wasn't complete. Some days I still felt like Leo pretending to be Leola rather than genuinely being myself. But those days were becoming less frequent. I was learning to move without constant vigilance, speak without forcing my voice, exist without expecting violence. Chris noticed the changes during his visits. You're more confident. Less like you're bracing for impact every moment. I'm starting to believe I might actually be good at this. Leading Ironclaw, I mean. Not just surviving it, but genuinely making it better. You are good at it. Better than most alphas with decades of experience. You care about the wolves you lead. That's what makes the difference between adequate leadership and transformative leadership. Some of them still hate me. Still think I'm too weak, too soft, too Omega to lead properly. Let them think that. The results speak for themselves. Ironclaw functions better now than it did under Gregor's brutality. That's what matters, not whether everyone likes you, but whether you're actually improving lives.
He was right.
But part of me still craved universal acceptance, still wanted every wolf in Ironclaw to acknowledge I deserved my position. That's natural, Chris said when I admitted this. Everyone wants to be accepted. But leadership means making decisions that won't please everyone. As long as you're acting with integrity and genuine care for pack welfare, some wolves disliking you is inevitable. I just want to stop feeling like an imposter. Like any moment someone will point out I'm still just Leo hiding behind the Luna Queen title. You're not hiding anymore. You're leading. Openly. Effectively. Anyone who thinks otherwise is deliberately ignoring reality. The moment that changed everything came during the Autumn Pack Gathering, traditional celebration where all Ironclaw wolves came together to honor the moon goddess and reaffirm pack bonds. Under Gregor, these gatherings had been displays of dominance, the strong showing their power, the weak submitting, everyone reminded of their place in the hierarchy. I'd attended as Leo, invisible among other low-ranked wolves, terrified of being noticed. Now I was leading the gathering as Luna Queen, and I'd changed the entire format. Instead of dominance displays, we celebrated cooperation. Instead of emphasizing hierarchy, we recognized contributions from all ranks. Instead of fear, we built an actual community. The gathering was going well, wolves actually enjoying themselves rather than just enduring required attendance. Then one of the Omega women, a young wolf named Hannah, approached me with her daughter. "Luna Queen," Hannah said, her voice shaking slightly with nerves. "My daughter wanted to meet you. She's heard stories about Leo becoming Leola, about the hidden daughter who became Luna Queen. She says you're her hero." The little girl couldn't have been more than 5 years old. She looked up at me with absolute awe, like I was something magical rather than just a traumatized wolf trying her best. "You hid as a boy?" the girl asked. "Like playing pretend?" "Sort of like pretending," I said, kneeling to her level. "But I did it to stay safe, not for fun." "Because Alpha Gregor was mean?"
Yes.
"Because he was mean to Omegas like me and your mother. That's why I'm working to change things, so you never have to hide like I did. When I grow up, I want to be strong like you. Fight bad wolves and protect people." Her innocent conviction made my throat tight. This child saw me as hero, as someone worth emulating, as proof that Omegas could be more than victims. "You can be whatever you want," I told her seriously. "Strong warrior, wise healer, clever scholar, anything. That's what I'm trying to build here. A pack where being Omega doesn't limit what you can become." "Thank you, Luna Queen." Hannah's eyes were wet. Before the reforms, I was terrified to have a daughter. Terrified she'd face what you described, hiding or death as only options. Now she has a future. A real future, where being female doesn't mean being worthless. You did that. You gave her that. After they left, I stood there processing the interaction. I'd been so focused on my own trauma, my own recovery, my own struggle to lead effectively. I hadn't fully considered what my survival and transformation meant to other wolves. I wasn't just reforming Ironclaw for myself. I was creating the pack I'd needed when I was 13, somewhere that would have protected Leola instead of forcing her to become Leo. "You're crying," Chris observed, appearing beside me. "Good crying. Hopeful crying." I wiped my eyes. A little girl just told me she wants to be strong like me when she grows up. Like I'm something worth aspiring to rather than just someone who survived through hiding. You are worth aspiring to. You took impossible circumstances and transformed them into purpose. That's exactly what heroes do. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who didn't want others to suffer like I did. That's what makes you a hero. Caring about others despite your own pain. Using trauma as motivation to prevent similar suffering. Chris pulled me close. "You've done something remarkable here, Leola. You've transformed Ironclaw from brutal to functional. You've given Omegas hope they didn't have before. You've proven that strength comes in many forms. That's a legacy worth celebrating." The gathering continued around us, wolves actually enjoying community, children playing without fear, Omegas participating openly rather than hiding in shadows. This was what Ironclaw could be, what it was becoming. I'd stopped hiding. Stopped being Leo, the disguise that kept me safe. I'd become Leola, Luna Queen who used her survival to help others thrive. And for the first time since becoming Leola again, I felt like I genuinely deserved the title. Not because I was perfect, not because I'd figured everything out, but because I cared enough to keep trying despite constant fear of failure. That was enough. It had to be enough. And watching Hannah's daughter play with other Omega children, all of them growing up with protections and opportunities I'd never had, I knew it was. The hidden daughter had become Luna Queen. And Luna Queen was building a kingdom where no child would ever have to hide like she once did. 1 year after taking leadership of Ironclaw, Chris and I stood on the platform overlooking the pack assembly, preparing for the formal ceremony that would mark Ironclaw's graduation from royal administration to independent territory status. Nervous? Chris asked, his hand finding mine through our bond. Terrified. What if they revert to old ways the moment we're not actively supervising? What if all these changes disappear? They won't revert. You've built something sustainable, not just rules, but actual cultural shifts. That doesn't disappear overnight. He squeezed my hand reassuringly. Besides, you'll still be their Luna Queen. Still have authority to intervene if problems emerge. This is acknowledgement of success, not abandonment. The Ironclaw wolves assembled below us, hundreds of them, representing every rank and role. Some I'd known as Leo, back when I was an invisible kitchen worker, hiding among them. Others had joined since the reforms, drawn by reports that Ironclaw had transformed from brutal to functional. I looked at their faces and saw the changes we'd built together. Omegas standing confidently instead of cowering. Warriors whose strength was measured by character rather than just violence. Elders who'd adapted despite decades of different culture. Children growing up with hope instead of fear. Ironclaw Pack, I said, my voice carrying across the assembly. 1 year ago, I returned here as your Luna Queen. Many of you remember me as Leo, the kitchen worker who hid his identity to survive. Some of you resented my authority, questioned my right to lead, and believed I was too weak to transform this pack. Murmurs of acknowledgement. They remembered their own skepticism. Together, we've proven that wrong. Ironclaw has transformed from one of the most brutal packs in 5 kingdoms to one of the most functional. Omega abuse is down 93%. Pack cohesion is stronger than it's been in decades. Wolves who would have left to escape the violence are now choosing to stay and build something better. I paused, meeting as many eyes as I could. This wasn't just my work. This was all of us choosing to change. Choosing to believe that strength didn't require cruelty, that protection mattered more than domination, that we could be better than what Alpha Gregor built through fear. You led that change, Drake called out, the same warrior who challenged me months ago and now served as one of my most loyal enforcers. You came back to the pack that tried to destroy you and made it into somewhere worth belonging to. That's Luna Queen's strength. It's our strength, I corrected. Every wolf who adapted despite difficulty. Every Omega who trusted the new protections despite years of betrayal. Every warrior who learned that defending the weak was more admirable than dominating them. We did this together. Chris stepped forward then, using his Alpha King authority to make the next announcement official. By my authority as Alpha King, I hereby declare Ironclaw Pack fully reformed and graduated from royal administration. Luna Queen Leola Bramblet has successfully transformed this territory from brutal to exemplary. Ironclaw now operates as independent territory under her continued leadership, serving as model for what other packs can become through sustained reform effort. Cheers erupted from the assembly. Genuine celebration, not just polite acknowledgement. They were proud of what they'd built. Proud of transforming from most brutal to most reformed. Proud of their Luna Queen who'd led that transformation despite having every reason to just destroy them instead. After the ceremony, I found Ruth in the crowd. My aunt had been visiting more frequently, helping with some of the education programs we'd implemented. Your mother would be so proud, Ruth said, pulling me into a hug. The daughter she protected. The hidden girl who became Luna Queen. The woman who transformed the pack that killed her mother into somewhere that honors her memory through protecting others. I just did what felt necessary. That's what makes it heroic. Acting despite fear because others need you too. Ruth pulled back, studying my face. You look happy. Actually happy, not just surviving. I think I am happy. For the first time in years, I'm not just focused on survival. I'm building something, creating something, making a difference that matters. That's what life is supposed to be, a purpose beyond just existing.
You found that.
I'm grateful you lived long enough to discover it. That night, alone with Chris in our chambers, I reflected on how far I'd come from the terrified 13-year-old who'd cut her hair and bound her chest to survive. Do you ever regret it? I asked him. Finding me? Claiming a mate who came with so much trauma and complications?
Never.
Not once. Chris's certainty was absolute. You're the strongest wolf I've ever met, Leola. The bravest. The most determined. Finding you didn't complicate my life. It gave it meaning beyond just ruling territories. I'm still scared most days. Still convinced I'm failing. That's what makes you good at leadership. Leaders who think they're perfect stop improving. Leaders who acknowledge fear while acting anyway. They're the ones who achieve real change. When I was Leo, I used to dream about what life would be like if I could just be myself. If I didn't have to hide. The dreams were always impossible. Safety, acceptance, purpose. Things Leo could never have. I looked at him, feeling the mate bond hum between us. You made the impossible real. Gave me everything I'd been too scared to even hope for. You made it real. I just provided opportunity. You did the work, survived 3 years of hiding, adapted to being Leola again, led Ironclaw's transformation despite constant doubt. That's all you, not me. It's us. Your support made it possible. Then let's call it team effort and both take credit. 5 years after becoming Luna Queen, Ironclaw had become unrecognizable from what it had been under Gregor. The brutal pack that forced me to hide as a boy had transformed into a thriving territory known throughout 5 kingdoms for its Omega protections and functional culture. I stood in the same courtyard where I'd once hidden among kitchen workers, terrified of being noticed. Now I stood as Luna Queen addressing new wolves who'd come specifically to join Ironclaw because of its reputation for fairness and opportunity. Welcome to Ironclaw Pack, I said to the assembled newcomers. Some of you know the history, that this was once one of the most brutal territories in the kingdoms. That Omegas were destroyed, weakness was punished with death, and survival required constant vigilance. They nodded. The history was well known, taught as cautionary tale about what packs could become without proper oversight. That's not what Ironclaw is anymore. We've spent 5 years transforming into something better. A pack where all wolves are valued regardless of rank. Where strength is measured by character as much as physical dominance. Where protection matters more than fear. Is it true you hid as a male for 3 years? A young Omega woman asked nervously. The stories say you disguised yourself as a boy to survive. It's true. I became Leo at 13 because being Leola meant certain death. I hid for 3 years, terrified of discovery, surviving through careful disguise. I met her eyes. But that's not the end of the story. The end is that I survived, became Luna Queen, and used that experience to transform the pack that forced me to hide into somewhere no one else has to. That's why I came here, she said. Because if an Omega who had to hide can become Luna Queen, maybe there's hope for the rest of us too. There's more than hope. There's opportunity, protection, and genuine chance to build lives beyond just survival. That's what Ironclaw offers now. That's what we'll continue to build together. The final moment that marked my complete transformation came during a visit to the neutral territory town where Chris and I had stopped during our journey from Ironclaw to the palace, the place where I'd worn feminine clothing for the first time in years and marveled at wolves living without constant fear. We walked through the market again, 5 years later, and I realized I'd become one of those wolves I'd envied, someone living openly, confidently, without survival consuming every thought. Remember when we stopped here? Chris asked, clearly thinking the same thing. You were so amazed by the normalcy, by wolves just existing without constant vigilance. I remember feeling like I'd never have that. Like normal was for other wolves, not for traumatized Omegas hiding from their fathers. And now I have it. Not the same normal, I'm Luna Queen, which comes with its own complications. But I'm living openly, using my real name, existing as myself without constant fear. I looked at him. You gave me that second chance at life that wasn't just surviving. We gave each other that. I'd been ruling for years without real purpose beyond maintaining territories. You gave me reason to be Alpha King beyond just accumulating power, using that power to protect wolves who need protection. We continued through the market, and a little girl ran up to us, maybe 6 years old, wearing clothes that marked her as Omega from a nearby pack. Are you Luna Queen Leola? She asked breathlessly. From Ironclaw? The one who hid as a boy. Yes, that's me. My mom says your proof Omegas can be strong. That hiding isn't a weakness, if it's how you survive. Her eyes were wide with admiration. When I grow up, I want to be Luna Queen too. Protect people and make packs better. Then work hard, be brave even when you're scared, and care about others even when it's difficult. I told her seriously. That's what Luna Queens do. After she ran back to her mother, I stood there processing. Another child who saw me as a hero, as proof that Omegas could be more than victims. Another life potentially changed by my survival and transformation. That's your legacy, Chris said quietly. Not just reforming Ironclaw. Giving Omegas throughout the kingdoms hope that they can be more than their circumstances demand. I just survived. That shouldn't be heroic. Surviving impossible circumstances and then using that survival to help others, that's exactly what heroism is. 10 years after hiding as Leo, I stood before the assembled 5 kingdoms at the Alpha King's annual gathering. Chris had invited me to speak about Ironclaw's transformation, to share what we'd learned about reforming brutal cultures and protecting vulnerable wolves. 10 years ago, I was a 13-year-old hiding as a boy to survive my father's brutality, I said, my voice carrying across thousands of assembled wolves. I spent 3 years as Leo, terrified of discovery, convinced hiding was weakness rather than survival strategy. I paused, meeting eyes throughout the massive gathering. I was wrong about the weakness. Surviving 3 years of constant vigilance, daily pain from binding my chest, exhaustion from maintaining disguise every moment, that required more strength than I knew I possessed. And when the hiding ended, when I became Luna Queen and returned to reform the pack that tried to destroy me, I discovered that survival strength translates directly to leadership strength. Ironclaw has transformed from one of the most brutal packs in 5 kingdoms to one of the most functional. That transformation proves 3 things. First, reform is possible even for the worst cultures. Second, survivors make excellent leaders because they understand what needs protecting. Third, strength comes in many forms, and the strength required to hide and survive is just as valuable as the strength required to fight openly. I share this not to celebrate my own survival, but to encourage other packs to implement similar reforms. To trust that Omegas and other vulnerable wolves can lead effectively if given opportunity and support. To understand that protecting the weak isn't weakness, it's what makes packs genuinely strong. The applause after my speech was thunderous. Thousands of wolves acknowledging not just my story, but the broader message about reform and protection. After the gathering, multiple alphas approached requesting guidance on implementing similar changes in their territories. Multiple Omegas approached sharing their own survival stories and thanking me for giving them hope. You've become exactly what 5 kingdoms needed, Chris said as we returned to our chambers. Not just Luna Queen of Ironclaw, but voice for reform throughout all territories. I'm just sharing what worked. What transformed one brutal pack into something functional. You're revolutionizing how wolves think about rank, strength, and leadership. That's more than just sharing what worked. That's actively reshaping culture.
He was right.
I'd gone from hidden daughter to Luna Queen to voice for reform throughout 5 kingdoms. From powerless to powerful, from silenced to speaking for those who couldn't speak for themselves. My mother would be proud, I said quietly. She died trying to protect me from Gregor's brutality. Now I'm using her death, using everything I survived, to protect other wolves from similar fates. That's the best possible legacy, taking trauma and transforming it into purpose. 15 years after becoming Leo, I returned to the exact spot in Ironclaw's courtyard where I'd hidden among kitchen workers, terrified the Alpha King would notice me. This is where it started. I told the group of young wolves I was mentoring, all of them Omegas learning leadership skills. Right here. I stood in this courtyard disguised as Leo, hiding among other low-ranked wolves, praying I'd stay invisible. Were you scared? One young Omega asked. Terrified. Every single moment. For 3 years, I was convinced discovery meant death. I looked around the courtyard, seeing how much had changed. But fear didn't stop me from surviving. And when survival wasn't enough, fear didn't stop me from transforming this pack into somewhere better. How did you stop being scared? I didn't. I'm still scared sometimes. Scared of failing as Luna Queen, scared of not doing enough to protect vulnerable wolves, scared that all this change could revert if we're not vigilant. I met their eyes, but I act despite fear. That's what courage actually is. Not absence of fear, but action despite it. That's what we want to learn. How to lead despite being scared. Then I'll teach you. Share everything I learned from hiding as Leo and leading as Leola. Help you become the leaders your packs need. Training young Omegas to lead became my primary focus in later years, passing on everything I'd learned about survival, transformation, and using trauma as motivation for reform. Each student I trained went on to lead their own reforms in different territories, spreading the changes Ironclaw had pioneered. The hidden daughter, who'd become Luna Queen, was now creating an entire generation of Omega leaders who would reshape pack culture throughout 5 kingdoms. Chris had been right years ago. Finding me hadn't complicated his life. It had given both our lives meaning beyond just existing. We'd survived. We'd transformed our circumstances. And we'd used that transformation to help countless others do the same. That was legacy worth building. And I wasn't finished yet. There were still packs that needed reforming, still Omegas who needed protection, still young wolves who needed to learn that survival was just the beginning, that you could take trauma and transform it into purpose. So I kept working.
Kept teaching.
Kept building. The girl who'd hidden as a boy had become the woman who changed everything. And she was just getting started. 20 years later, I stood in the newly constructed memorial garden in Ironclaw, a peaceful space dedicated to wolves who died under Gregor's brutal regime, including my mother. 20 years, I said to Chris, who stood beside me. 20 years since you found me hiding as Leo. Best discovery I ever made, he replied, his hand finding mine. Finding my mate. Reforming 5 kingdoms. Building a legacy that will outlast both of us. Not bad for what started as routine territory inspection. I sometimes think about an alternate timeline. What if I'd stayed hidden better? What if you hadn't noticed me? Then I would have spent my life searching for a mate I never found. And you would have spent your life hiding. Neither outcome was acceptable. He pulled me closer. The moon goddess knew what she was doing, pairing us. You needed someone with power to protect you. I needed someone with purpose to guide me. Together we became something better than either of us would have been alone. Around us, Ironclaw wolves moved through the memorial garden, paying respects, learning history, understanding where they'd come from so they could appreciate what they'd become. Mother would approve of this, I said, looking at the memorial stone bearing her name among dozens of others. Turning pain into purpose. Making sure no one forgets the cost of brutality while also celebrating how far we've come. Your entire life has been turning pain into purpose. That's your gift, taking impossible circumstances and making them meaningful. Our gift. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Partner in revolution, he agreed. Luna Queen and Alpha King, reshaping 5 kingdoms one reform at a time. We stood together in comfortable silence, Two wolves who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something remarkable from the connection. The hidden daughter had become Luna Queen. The dying pack culture had become a reformed example. And together, they'd proven that survival was just the beginning, that you could take trauma and transform it into a legacy that changed everything. 20 years. 20 years of building, reforming, protecting, teaching. And neither of us was finished yet. Because some things were worth fighting for. Some legacies were worth building. And some transformations were worth every difficult moment it took to achieve them. The girl who'd hidden as Leo had become the woman who changed 5 kingdoms. And her story would inspire others to do the same for generations to come. And that's the complete story. Leola went from hiding as Leo to becoming Luna Queen, who transformed Ironclaw and inspired reform throughout 5 kingdoms. Chris went from routine territory inspection to finding his mate and building revolutionary legacy. And together they proved that survival is just the beginning, that trauma can become a purpose that changes everything. Leola hiding as Leo for 3 years. Chris discovering his mate was disguised as a boy. The rescue from Gregor's execution attempt. The combat trial where Leola proved her strength. The little girl who saw Luna Queen as her hero. 20 years of transformation showing lasting change. What was your favorite moment? The discovery? The rescue? The combat trial? The reform spreading? Drop your favorites in the comments. Smash that like button if you loved this journey from hidden boy to revolutionary Luna Queen. Subscribe for more werewolf stories with survival, transformation, and proof that the strongest wolves are often the ones who had to learn strength through trauma. Thanks for following Leola and Chris's story from that terrifying moment in Ironclaw's courtyard to building a legacy that changed 5 kingdoms. Remember, hiding isn't weakness when it's survival, and survivors make the best leaders. See you in the next story, where we'll have more supernatural drama, more identity reveals, and definitely more proof that the wolves everyone underestimates are actually the most dangerous.